Need money for schooling. Put this picture. Women, teachers, our rights are lost. They put the same exact pictures. They couldn't be bothered to take a picture, another picture to accompany this article. And it goes on throughout. So you can see this picture is something that's been used over and over in their archives. So I started thinking about the issue of repetition in media. And at that point, I had met a very important person during our Little Rock, Arkansas trip when I was with me. I met an actress called Gina Davis. She was actually on a panel discussion with me. And her focus right now is research and the idea of how women are represented in Hollywood media, and specifically to audiences that are children, little girls and little boys. Because children, when they watch movies, they watch it over and over. It's like brainwashing. So she got me started thinking about images that are repeated over and over to the point that they become normal. Then I started looking at a book over here called فقه اللغة العربية, and let me pick it up. So فقه اللغة العربية, I got this also 2 years ago, so this two obsessions started at the same time. This writer wrote this book 1,000 years ago. What he did is he gathered words, Arabic words, in categories. Nobody's ever done this again. He was the only person that's ever done this. And I think because it's a failed exercise, because everybody will say, oh, you forgot this word, but he actually did this. This page is open to the levels of love. So he starts from the lowest level of love to the highest level of love. Now when you read the words one by one, a lot of them you don't remember, you don't recognize. What's this word? I've never heard of it before. And I started thinking about, throughout my childhood, I've been told that Arabic words, because they're linked to the Quran, are alive. They will never die. It's a miracle. But I didn't recognize the words. So I started reading more into the idea of what dies and what stays alive. And there's a writer that it's in Arabic, titled, The Arabic Word is a Living Being. And his conclusion from this book, that a word that is used stays alive. A word that is not used dies. It's an obvious conclusion, but yeah, you needed a writer to put that to you. And then that brings us back to the Quran being alive, is because people continuously read it, and it stays alive, and it stays in context, because people expand their belief through this writing. But what about the words that die? They're in a book, they're archived, so I looked them up, but they have zero meaning to me. This link of repetition and giving it life, and not repeating it and allowing it to die, is a type of disappearance. And I think the image of the Saudi woman, the way it's being repeated today, is what's going to stay alive. And what's not being repeated is going to die. So 50 years from now, you're going to look back, trying to find out, what does the Saudi woman look like? And this is what you will find. And this is not reality. This has gone through a filter. So let's go to the artworks. I'll walk you through, I think maybe this one, because it's a photograph that I pulled out of that display over there. So I used the levels of happiness. And why did I choose happiness? Actually, the 4 words that I used are the 4 categories: happiness, courage, intelligence, and love. These are 4 types of descriptions you usually describe women. I superimposed it on these images. There's a contradiction. Do you see happiness in this image? Do you see courage in that image? Do you see intelligence? And that contradiction is the energy that I want to highlight between what images are being preserved and the disappearance of the image that I want to exist. Moving on to the next one. Maybe we do it here. These are the earliest ones. So from my newest works, you have my earliest works. These are the first photographs I ever took. They're black and white prints, hand printed by me. These and the one back there. This is titled Pointing to the Future. Very obvious. At that point, I was working with very direct lines of communication. I was quite young and my ideas were, here's my idea, I'm producing it in this photograph in this form. It eventually, blinded by tradition, started the idea of tradition linked to identity, and then what if tradition that makes up my identity becomes oppressive or does not want me? Do I get rid of my identity and find another one? Or do I fight the idea of recreating my traditions to incorporate them still in my life and make them form my identity? Silent Song talks about having a voice in society and being able to speak. And you'll see now lines that started here about speaking, and then at the Landscapes of the Mind, which happened about 5 years later, I still address the issue of speaking, so obviously it didn't get solved in that time. After this, I moved on to live in London in a residency and created this body of work. Landscapes of the Mind was a new experiment for me because I decided to step out of the studio into the 1 mile radius. After that, I decided to add more layers because I just couldn't stay in that stage of production where you have a two-dimensional image, flat. I had more ideas. I thought the dimensions of a black and white print needed more for me to express myself. So I started to do silk screen printing. While living in London, there was actually a very strong pop art, not movement, but they were being shown all over the museums. So there was like at least for the 6 months I was living there, that's what I saw all the time, any museum I went to. And I really enjoyed the idea of how pop art removes an image from a newspaper, that is, you toss it away, and then puts it onto a canvas, and it becomes completely different. So, remember I told you for 2 years I was collecting those images of women. These are also the start of it. And I actually have them appear in many, many of my landscapes of the mind. And I separate them, and I put them together. Sometimes they hang out alone. This woman over here, she's just chilling out on the side over there. What made an appearance was the doves for the first time, because I started working with the doves, and it evolved to a large-scale installation. And you see the line going through the dove's neck, because as you know in Arabic schools, here in Saudi Arabia, when you draw something and it has a life, you have to cross out the neck because you don't want to imitate God and its creation. So it started here. Another thing that I was highlighting within these photographs is the landscape that I belong to. And people always have this imagination of the Saudi landscape being a beautiful sand dune with a oud, a Bedouin playing the rababa and the palm tree. In reality, at that point, barbed wire was our landscape, barriers, concrete barriers, and plus oil installations. So you see here a few of the oil installations that I see from my window, from the window of my bedroom. I play with a lot of imagery. I focused a lot on time and the tension of time. So you see meters. Meters always stress people out when you put money, and then it's about time and how it's moving. And I have frozen clocks over there, so that's about time, not moving fast enough, and that play on these issues. So this is Landscapes of the Mind. After that, I moved to Dubai to do a new residency, and I began to think about the idea of isolation because I've been living in a city, London, and I moved to another city in Dubai. Before that I was in a town, Bahrain. And the idea of the isolation that a person feels within a city, you're sitting with a lot of people, but you're very isolated. And the idea of the isolation that you feel when you're in Saudi, especially, the high walls our houses have, the tinted windows, the partitioned restaurants, and these are all self-imposed isolation. I also started thinking about why this glass exists and how it's isolating the viewer from the artwork. So I decided for my next collection to actually work with something without the frame. I wanted it to be more accessible, and I introduced this artwork. This collection, which you see an artwork of over here, all the ones without a frame are part of the collection called And We Had No Shared Dream. It was shot beyond the 1 mile radius, so I went out to the cities surrounding me, which is Khobar, Dammam, Hassa. This is actually the causeway between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. I already told you in my talk that this project was shot out of a moving car, from rooftops, because I had to step out of my comfort zone. I also used elements that you usually find in cities: neon, spray paint, collage. And why did I use spray paint? Is because when I arrived in Dubai to do my residency, the 2 artists before me that were there residing were very well-known graffiti artists from Pichura 2000 and Stash. These are the founding fathers of the graffiti movement of the 1980s. So they left me their spray cans, played with their spray cans. I used a little bit of their techniques in my artwork. But in this artwork, I addressed an issue that, again, comes up a lot in my art, and it's a way for people to heal themselves. This is about my father's passing. And this was only the single artwork I could have produced at that point because it was very raw and new to me, the passing of my father. This is a poem by Dr. Ghazi al-Qsaybi, a historical figure for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He has passed away. He was a minister, different ministerial positions. He was our ambassador in different countries, and he was also a lover and a poet. And this poem was written as a eulogy for his best friend who passed away. So the translation, which is a bad translation, but it says something like, "Nostalgia carries us to the sea, but desire will not allow us to come back to the shore." And it's about moving from one space to another. And that's the way he's addressed the passing of his friend. And for me, through doing this artwork, I photographed 2 different spaces. They look like they're the same space, but they're not. They also have different sizes to actually define that this is one type of space and this is another. But the link is this line of text. You see a shore in the back, but it doesn't look like close enough that you can actually go back to it. And this is the meaning behind this artwork, which is one of my favorites and very emotionally attached to it. So to bring it to Jeddah is sort of the biggest pleasure. I was very happy to have it appear because it was actually not for sale. So we brought it out for Jeddah. Other artworks. امشي afterwards we can do it. خلينا الله يخليكي منى. عشان I can move on with هذا. ايه بقول لك بالعربي الحين ارجع special هذا. So we finished from this artwork and we move on to If I Forget You, Don't Forget Me. This is a project that I did last March, 2012. It was, again, it's called If I Forget You, Don't Forget Me, and that's the title of the book that I'm signing today for you. And it was a series of photographs. So I went back to the one-dimensional photograph because of the nostalgic feeling I felt this project had. Even the framing is sort of like a window, so you're looking into somebody's life and memories. This photograph is actually sold with the bulb, so it's an installation altogether. So when people hang it in their homes, it comes in this form. I felt that that's how I wanted it to stay, and that was the condition I gave the gallery when they sell my artwork, that each photograph gets the wire with the bulb. So I already told you about why and how this project was done. It's a portraits of objects, telling the life story of different people. So I'll just give you a little intro to this one and maybe one around the corner. So this one's called Hamad and Madawi. Hamad and Madawi married when they were 19 years old in Qasim. He left his wife to go study in America. And this story actually shows you that at that time there was a lot of separation of families in Saudi Arabia. And it was very, very impoverished time. When he went to America, his wife Madawi would send pictures to him. طبعا a Qasimi woman does not look like this. She would actually do a whole theatrical display setup. So she would wear a sleeveless dress. She had braid up to here, so she would braid it back and then bring it up like this, so her hair looks short. And she would send it to her husband in America, trying to look like an American woman. طبعا I talked about this oil family last night, but he's been married to her for over 51 years. And his father is married to 4 wives, and so is her father. But he's been loyal to the same woman, and he worked for oil for 41 years. All his children work for oil, all his brothers, all her brothers work for oil. So this is a true oil family. Another person I can tell you a story about is Muna Atiyah. She's from Medina. And Muna studied, all of her schooling was done in Egypt. At the age of 5, she was sent to boarding school. Imagine sending a child at the age of 5 to boarding school, but there were no schools for women or girls, let's say, and her father was a staunch believer in educating women. So he sent her to Cairo to study in a convent, French, English, and Arabic. Then Jamal Abdel Nasser and King Faisal had this agreement. All Saudis were pulled out of Egypt, and all Egyptians were pulled out of Saudi. So she came back and studied in Riyadh in the king's palace, where he had a special school for his daughters and Nukhbat al-Mujtama', let's say, the privileged few. She studied in that school. At that point, there was only كيف تقولوا أدبي? Arts. Liberal arts path. Path for girls and not science. So she actually, at the age of 16, took her best friend and she's like, we're going to go talk to the king. Just like that. And those days, King Faisal on Wednesdays would open court for women. And his daughters would receive the women and they would actually tell him their grievances or what they wanted. So she walked in as a 16-year-old. لو سمحت Malik, I want to have ilmi section. All my grades are straight A's in all the sciences, and I think I should be studying science. And he decreed, because of her request, that women will have a science track. So she opened this door for women, but she didn't walk through it because it took a year for science track to open, and she had already gone into the arts track and graduated with a diploma in arts. Later, she graduated from high school as the first in the kingdom. And had decreed also that the top 10 will go on scholarship, no questions asked. And then everybody else has to apply. So she went to the ministry. First, I want to go on my scholarship. And the ministry said, no, we don't send girls. She's like, but I'm the first. It's like, still, we don't. So she's like, okay, where's King Faisal? And they told her that King Faisal, and at that point, King Faisal would spend winter in Riyadh and summer in Taif. So she went to Taif, and she walked into his court, and this is how she describes it in her story. And the video of her story is here. The court was humongous. So she walked in, she was so nervous, she sat on the first chair she saw. And he was at the end of the court, and he told her, Ya binti, my daughter, I'm an old man, I can't hear you if you're going to sit over there. So either you move here, or you go out. And so she moved up to him, told him, I was the first. And he said, I know. And that's how connected our king was to what was happening. And she said, I want to go on a scholarship. He said, but we don't send girls alone to America. She's like, but I'm going to get married soon. He said, okay. And he decreed for her to go on scholarship. Of course, she did get married post-summer and got pregnant right away, so she never went on the scholarship. So she opened another door for women, but never got to walk through it. But that year, 4 women went on scholarship to Beirut to study different sciences on behalf of. So these are the collection of clippings she had when she actually turned out the Al-Ula, the first on the title of the artwork is the first. This is a photograph of her father, because I worked within their offices. So I just, walked around and I found things, and the picture of her father, her husband, and her favorite baby son. This man, he's a man now, but she still considers him a baby. And I'll tell you about one last photograph. This office is the office of Saud al-Ashkar, a young Bedouin from the Mutayri tribe. Saud used to herd sheep for his family at the age of 8. His father was a pure Bedouin. It was his profession to herd sheep, but the government had urbanized Bedouins, so he thought part of the urbanization project, and I'm going to turn into a farmer. So he started planting palm trees. Bedouins are not farmers, and that's what they discovered slowly throughout time in Saudi Arabia. His palms died, and his family was living in poverty, and their sole source of food were the herd of sheep that they originally had. So a huge drought happened in Saudi Arabia. Saud was asked to take, at the age of 8, with his 11-year-old brother, his sheep, across the Dahna desert, which is a humongous desert, walking on foot with a bag of dates and a small bottle of water, jarrah, like a leather pouch. They made it, and it's a surprise that they actually survived. Now, Saud al-Ashkar, because of coincidence, his father passed away during his journey across the desert. His uncle took him in, put him in a school, and then fate led him to study and reach Aramco. He later became the #2 man in the largest oil company in the world. And his story is sort of a reminder of how young Saudi Arabia is. This generation still exists that actually survived the drought, barely survived the drought, and then eventually saw the incredible wealth that's happening today. But they exist. It's not something, oh, it was 100 years ago. So I took a photograph of his office, and a lot of these people's photographs are taken in their offices because this is their post-retirement office. So they retire and they develop a little room. They think they're going to, continue to do work. But eventually the gym equipment walks in and the family boxes, and it becomes a storage room. So while I was printing this photograph, I found this little prayer hanging on the wall. And it says at the bottom of it, and I told you already during the talk, God, if I forget you, don't forget me. So this is a picture I was telling you about. And thank you very much for walking through this show.
Just a little thing, can you talk to us about this piece?
This is yours. So, as I told you, this collection, when I was doing it, it was more or less about the city and the interaction of solitude within the city. And when I decided to do this interaction, I decided to put it within a context of a romantic story. I made the city and the inhabitants are like a couple in love, but they were breaking up. Their relationship was being ended, and they were having a back and forth conversation. So this artwork is called "Do You Share My Dreams?" And of course, the city will not answer. It will only explain. But the collection is called "And We Had No Shared Dreams." So I answered on behalf of the city within the set. The technique I used for this photograph is stenciling, but this is an extensive stenciling, which is also a graffiti technique, where they place layers and layers of paint to produce an image. This woman is wearing a bisht, which in Qasim they give this bisht to a bride, and it says, it has text on the back that says, "Mashallah, Tabarakallah," this is when she's a bride. And my grandmother used to tell me about this bisht, that they would give it to a woman. So they actually did it to her. They give it to her once to wear, and then it's taken away and given to somebody else. Because she only wears it when she moves from her father's house to her husband's house. And then she doesn't need the abaya anymore. It's not because they're liberal, it's because she's never leaving the house. So,
in which city? The giant speaking in which city, by the way?
this is in Al-Hassan. And then you can see like little graffiti. Bob Marley is big. And they just, different things that are written around here. But there's an interesting, actually there's a lot of young artists now that are documenting the graffiti movement that's evolving in Saudi Arabia. And I think I like that combination of the two. I think especially graffiti is like anarchist. They don't follow anything. It's very organic. So it's interesting to see what's being written on the walls by a graffiti, because it's not about making money, nothing. Just I'm going to write what I feel.
The point is not the way also to the people to express themselves, to define any place to express themselves and talk about love. I mean,
yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you everybody for listening to me, and